Welcome to a special edition of Politalk. I'm Caitlin Gibbons, and today I'm here with Ramsey Scott, Alex Baskett from the Metropolitan, and Chris Rork. Now guys, there are a lot of measures this November on the ballot that could really affect students. Chris, do you mind telling us about some of them?
Yes, the most prominent are 60, 61, and Proposition 101, and they would have a disastrous effect, in most people's opinion, on the state of Colorado and especially our higher education budget.
And why especially on higher education?
Well, we're already facing $1.1 billion budget deficit for the next fiscal year, and with this, with less revenue coming from taxes, it's going to be just disastrous on institutions like Metro.
Well, as devastating as the possibility is of those measures, that voters aren't seeing the return on their investment. The United States invests more into education than any other country in the world, and we are graduating less students than 15 other countries. I think voters really want to take a step back and just redefine how we spend all this money.
So really, 60, 61, 101, while they might hurt the eventual funding of schools, even if they don't pass, we still are faced with the problem that maybe we have to start re-examining how we think of higher education in this country, in other words.
One way or another, the funding sources are going to have to be reevaluated.
I know that through ASC that you and several other groups were for trying to find some other alternatives. I mean, what else is there really besides government funding?
Honestly, there is no other way to keep our institutions open and accessible without a ballot initiative for higher education coming up in 2011. With this large of a shortfall, we can't bridge it. We can't bridge this basically $1.2 billion. And if these amendments pass, you're talking about a significant, $5 or $6 billion without a ballot measure to increase taxes, to invest in higher education in our generation.
Well, now we saw something. It wasn't a ballot measure this last legislative session, but there was the Decide Act that failed and died in the legislature. But basically, they want to put the question to the voters. Alex, what do you think? Will the voters decide that they want to fund higher education out of their taxes?
I believe that voters are willing to fund higher education, but I believe that higher education is going to have to meet them halfway. When you talk about creating accessibility, that voters understand that finances shouldn't keep a student out of college, they don't necessarily agree that every student should be in the higher education system.
Well, I mean, I think maybe that goes back to the basis idea of trying to reevaluate. Maybe college isn't for everybody. I mean, that's kind of a really politically maybe not an easy thing to say, but maybe that's something we should consider, that an 18-year-old kid who's just finishing high school, who doesn't have a clue, to go $50,000 in debt.
Well, the state is already sending that message to our kids. Your newspaper just today shows a 31% increase for students at Metro just this year that the school is applying for, and every dollar of that is because the state is not contributing a dollar towards higher education. That's APR for people who are going through 4 or 5 years of school. 25% increases every time, disincentivizes people from learning.
Well, it may disincentivize people from learning, but I think it also calls out the less serious students from the more serious students. And when a school has limited resources, as Metro and every other Colorado institution does, I think they should be best spent on the students who are most interested in finishing a completing a degree.
Well, I mean, the problem with that though is that how do you create that filter? Do you just throw everybody into the mix, have some people fail out, incur some debt, and then those other students will be able to the good students will be able to move forward? I mean, how do you create that filter?
That's the system that already exists. I think that by creating additional barriers that have existed all through education previously, and the difficulty of getting accepted and graduating, the limited number of institutions that used to exist in this country, now there's a financial barrier, and the investment will be worth it for a student who can make the most of that degree.
Right. Now, gentlemen, and focusing back to the original topic today about the funding, what can be done in Colorado's economy to not only bolster the general fund, but to maybe solve some of the issues that we are facing with higher education?
Well, I think what needs to be touched on, you mentioned the Colorado economy, and you mentioned some barriers that people need, but by 2018, a Georgetown study just came out saying that 67% of the jobs in Colorado are going to require some sort of post-secondary education. And if we want to move forward in our economy and grow our economy, people have to be able to get a degree without encountering 25% tuition hikes, and the Colorado has to invest in their students if they want the returns on their
I think that we should maybe take a step back and think, how are we going to do that? I mean, if we are going to try and get people to go into a secondary degree, how do we get them through their first degree without incurring that debt? Because, I mean, as college students, we can all attest to the fact that we're going to be incurring some debt before we even go on to a master's program. So how do we provide that opportunity? And also, how do we provide an opportunity for students who can't afford college but might have those good grades, or went to a poor high school, didn't have a chance to really get the good grades because of the lack of education there?
You know, I think something very inventive that Metro is doing right now is they are currently partnering with private businesses, currently with the Hotel Learning Center, where they're bringing a business on campus that's going to provide actual job training plus additional funding to the campus. State funds aren't there, so why not bring in people from the business community to actually give students real-world experience and help fund the institution?
Well, and another thing that I've heard from Metro is that we are still very competitively priced for the type of institution we are. And Chris, maybe you could speak a little bit about the idea that's being floated about a higher tuition, higher aid model.
Well, the thing is, the money's not there for aid, and that same money, for example, the COF, comes from the state general fund. So you're eventually talking about the same part of the system that's lacking, which is state funds. And if while public and private partnerships are a great idea for enhancing our higher education here in Colorado, state funding is a central issue, and if we don't do something about it, all of Colorado's public higher institutions are going to be completely privatized by the end of the 2011 fiscal year.
I think that what also has to be addressed is that not the way Caitlin said about Metro being a good place to get an inexpensive degree. You have to look at, is it worth it for Colorado to continue funding Adams State, where they spend 4 times the amount per student to get that same degree that they could be getting at Metro?
Well, gentlemen, I think it's an issue that we're definitely going to be speaking more about after the November election. But in the meantime, I guess we can all cast our ballots the way we will, and hopefully all of you as well. For Ramsey Scott, Alex Baskett, and Chris Rork, I'm Caitlin Gibbons. Thank you.